Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Stash Report from the Stash Project. Today is September 10th, 2018, and we have some Revell news. Very little bit, but just enough to cover, as well as a few releases overseas, mostly reissues. They're all reissues, but some of them have new decals and things like that. And then we got in a good chunk of the September kits from round 2 this week as well, so they're running a little early on the schedule. There are a few things that were scheduled to come out at the end of the month, which of course have not come out. So, but we did get in 80% of the stuff that was supposed to come in. So for people who are waiting on that stuff, your time has come, as it were. So, starting off, obviously, with the little updates to the Revell saga as it soldiers on. The folks at Blitz have now officially taken over the Revell USA the website, yes, but the Facebook page is what I was trying to say. They're going to be working on a new Revell US website as well, but right now the primary thing was that they have taken control of the Facebook page, which is pretty much laid dormant since late March. I think March 17th was the last time anything had been posted on there, other than the community section, which is where you can post to Revell. Not that Revell ever answered any of those things anyway, but that was a little active here and there. People would post their completed builds in that section, or they would question Revell about parts and stuff like that, which was kind of disheartening. For me, feeling for those people, because they were, of course, talking to a blank wall at that point, because Revell didn't exist anymore for them to ask for parts. But so they've said, hey, our website is being rebuilt, and we have taken control of the Facebook page and Blitz. One of the key things, and I really don't want this to turn into a pat on my back festival, but it does just continue to amuse me that the information that I share with you guys, the enlightened, as it were, continues to be correct, and a lot of people have to sit around and mosey around and behind and be like, oh, you ended up being right about that. I'm sorry about being such a giant jackwad over my, So the things I got right, the list this week. One would be that the Facebook post specifically said that Revell of Germany and Revell are being operated as one unified company now. I told you guys that pretty much from the time the sale went through, that this was now going to effectively merge the two into the Revell. Remember, we made this joke a while back, being a variation of the Ohio State, being one of the only state universities that the alumni like to use the actual word "the" as being part of the thing. You don't say you're from the Pennsylvania State University, you say you're from Penn State. But people don't say they're from Ohio State, they are from the Ohio State University. So that was where the joke came from, the Revell. And people would constantly tell me, oh, that's that. No, Revell of Germany does not control Revell. It's owned by this other company, blah, blah, blah. No, it's a unified thing now. The Blitz people, the bankers in Germany, don't know the first thing about running a model company. They don't know injection molding from, vinyl tires. They saw an asset that was depreciated that they could make money with, and they purchased it. And I'm not going to say that maybe the people involved, because this new holding company is not directly owned by the company that these men, physically own and run, isn't like a side project. We discussed this in the original video about them buying it, that maybe they're modelers, and this was really just a neat opportunity for them to buy something and make it their own little personal fiefdom. Whether that's good or bad will be determined if that's what it is, and it wasn't strictly a business decision where they saw an asset in their company, in their country, with Revell of Germany, and an incredibly depreciated asset within the Revell US framework that, as we've discussed in the past, was one of the only things at Hobbico that made Hobbico any money. And realize that they could buy the stuff for ridiculously next to nothing, and then turn what will be a really big profit with it, relatively speaking, because if you would have went into Revell and paid the $10 million that Revell was, asking for as the bid price, versus the $3 million that they actually paid for everything, and especially the really amount of like $100,000 they paid for the Revell US operations and tooling and all that stuff, there's a lot of money to be made when you didn't spend that first $7 million up front, right? So their personal motivations behind it aside, it was, a financial decision that was made. And obviously, when you buy two existing model companies that are effectively the same company because they're owned by the same parent as Habaco, you got to merge the two things together. There's a redundancy of operations and everything else. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of the Revell USA people, were let go. Technically, they weren't Habaco employees in the first place. And then why some of those people have now been brought back into the fold with the new U.S. distribution system and, and warehousing system. It made sense for the people in Revell of Germany to run everything. You don't want to just be like, okay, well, we bought this asset, we know nothing about running it, and so we're going to hire just random people and have them run it. No, you would have the people that are the most established in the, the company that is the going concern, as it were, for Revell of Germany, because remember, Revell USA disappeared because of Habaco. So you put everything underneath them, and it becomes the Revell. There's just going to be a Revell now. There isn't really a Revell of Germany. Now, that doesn't mean that all of Revell US stuff's going into Revell of Germany style boxes and things like that. There will still be that separation, I would believe, at least in the current near term, where, you don't just go out and put everything in those thin boxes. You would continue to have US style boxes, mainly because a lot of the stuff that's going to be coming out in the terms of the first quarter and second quarter kits that never were released, those boxes are printed. They're sitting around China someplace, or well, no, they're assembled into model kits at this point, because some of that stuff's starting to come over for distribution at the end of this month into October. But, in the near term, you're not going to scrap a bunch of box art that's already been drawn and, and force it into and make new boxes, because that's an unnecessary expense at that point. Will they at some point unify the boxes? I don't know. I think that having a universal box, as it were, could save money in a overall sense, but at the same time, I think, pricing aside, like if you just stuck everything, the prices stayed relatively where they're at, and you just stuck Revell US kits into Revell of Germany style boxes, stuff that looks like an Asian box. It's if you don't know, because you don't buy icky yucky foreign stuff, and I'm about to drop some model parts on the floor that I had drying over there. It's this stuff, these long thin boxes that look kind of like boxes from Tamiya, Aoshima, Fujimi, whatever. I think it'll be a large kickback if you put U.S. kits in those boxes, only because so many of us have so many U.S. kits that are in the shoebox format, and those don't fit on our shelves, right? They just... It's one of those things. And so when Revell Monogram in the very late 1980s and early 1990s put everything in those sort of bigger dimensional boxes, they're way thicker and dimensionally larger than any Japanese box, which makes them impossible to stack with anything Japanese. You have to stack them with their own stuff. But, that we saw a bunch of the stuff. They're not only just imported kits from Revell of Germany, but the 55 Bel Air is in one of those, 54 is in one of those, the 56 Nomad's in one of those, the original Cadillac, 59 Cadillac kit is in one of those, the 37 Ford convertible with a trailer is in one of those, the 65 Impala is in one of those, and then they did that other size of box that, like, the Pro Modeler stuff came in that was not as big, but still way bigger than a regular, Revell box, and all that stuff just, I'm not saying that I'm OCD and I like everything to be neat and organized to the point of box size per se, but when you're trying to stack stuff together, like, oh, hey, these are my 1950s kits, and oh, hey, look, 5 of my 1950s kits are in great big boxes that don't easily fit in with every other 1950s domestic kit I own. It's just a pain in the tocus, as it were, to stack those things. So, yes, the Revell now. Revell USA is a thing. It's a limited liability corporation now, because it's, exists to be the distribution network, but Revell is being run out of Germany. It's the Revell. There's a branch in the United States, but it's not a thing, right? The thing is in Germany. The United States is just a distribution office. So, that being said, one of the other announcements that was made, somewhat of I believe, a tail between the legs sort of way, was the fact that through the original distribution of a blog that announced the Atlantis purchasing of Revell assets several days in advance of when the press release was supposed to come out, had to come back with information from Atlantis that Atlantis did not, in fact, buy every single piece of U.S. tooling. Huh. How about that? They only bought what they're describing as several hundred pieces, but it wasn't all of it. The Revell had come in and taken what they wanted, and then sold Atlantis the junk that was left over, which is exactly what I told you guys when this announcement came out. I have seen more people utter the phrase, and it was because nobody can read in comprehension, in a reading comprehension sort of way, repeat, you just regurgitate, Revell sold all the U.S. tooling to Atlantis. You actually read what that original press release says. It says all remaining tooling. It doesn't say all tooling, remaining tooling. That means it was the stuff that was left over. It's like going to, cleaning out your house and then auctioning off all the stuff that you didn't want to move with you. You see, around here, we have a elderly population, especially in this county, and I guarantee you at least 2-3 times a week there's some sort of living estate sale going on, which means that people have been, unfortunately, moved into, like, assisted care facilities, or just people downsizing, moving to Florida, or wherever their family ended up going after, after they left this place, because let's face it, a lot of the younger folks have left this area because steel mills closed, coal mines shut down, and that was really what the bread and butter of southwestern Pennsylvania was for a very long time. Now, of course, it is a burgeoning tech industry and all that sort of thing, but, for that sort of generation where there was, before the tech came in and after the mills in the mines closed, a lot of people fled this area, and so a lot of people's kids live someplace else. And a lot of the older folks, they're getting up there and they don't want to care for some great big house with all their stuff. They leave and they move, and here's all our junk, and we're gonna have an auction to get rid of it, and whatever doesn't sell, you donate it to let's see, I'm trying to think of, we obviously have Salvation Army and you have Goodwill and things like that, but we also have a U.S. Veterans type of program around here as well. You just donate the stuff to that, and those places have stores where they resell it. They're not actually giving, like, crock pots to veterans. They just sell the crock pots and give the money. But that's what happened. And you look, I've told you guys when this announcement was made, to look at what Atlantis does in terms of what they make. Currently, that's the stuff they went after. They didn't just, they got a bunch of the stuff, obviously, that Revell didn't want, and even they don't want some of it. That's how those NASCAR things got sold to Savina's JR. They had no use for NASCAR kits. That's not what they do. So they got what was left over. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't sell some more stuff off of at some point, if there's more stuff in their catalog of tooling, that when they go through it all up in New York, they don't go, well, we're not going to run this either, so what other third party can we sell this piece of tooling to? Atlantis was quickly dubbed the salvation of the hobby because everyone thought that all of the tooling got sold. One of the first posts on the Facebook page was, just to be clear, Atlantis owns all of Revell's tooling, and this new Revell will only be making new tooling. They're starting from scratch. Holy mother of God, is that inaccurate? Literally nothing you just said is true. But you just said, to clear this up. You literally were like, hey, over here, I have an important announcement to make. All of it is lies. That is all. Now, they're just regurgitating what they've been told, and I've seen several people on various comment sections say things I know that I've said in these videos, so props up to you guys for telling the truth and making sure the story stays on the straight and narrow. But I'm thinking somewhere along the lines, people at Blitz were, called somebody at Atlantis and went, look, people are really confused as to what went on. You have to clear up the situation. You know as well as I do that we own a substantial amount of the Elk Grove Village-based tooling. It's over in West Chicago now, but you told everybody you bought all the tooling, and that's just not true. So yes, a little clarification of the press release had to be done in terms of what they bought. Now, I have nothing against Atlantis. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do, and I wish them all the success in it, and I don't think they were intentionally being misleading. Like I said, the press release said all remaining. If just people are really, we talked about this before, really taking this Revell thing personally. And they can't see the business aspect of it. And well, let's face it, a lot of people can't see business aspects of anything. That's just not where their mind is in terms of things, especially within their personal hobby space. But, it's one of those things where, okay, now I'm going to read this and try to make sense of it and not go crazy on the internet first. And lastly, on that thought, was several posts to their Facebook page announcement were related to, oh my god, how much are you going to price gouge us for these kits now? I understand that there are a number of you out there who are retired, who are on disability, who are on fixed incomes in one way or another. Look, I don't work 40-hour weeks either, so my hobby budget right now is incredibly limited. Fortunately, it's not like I don't have things to build, and I'm guessing that the same goes for everyone else out there in this sort of scenario, because let's face it, the amount of people that have 10 model kits because they only buy one when they finish one versus the amount of people that have like 100+ model kits. I'm not even talking like 1,000+. I'm just talking about 100+. Because let's face it, for most people, 100 kits is probably a lifetime worth of models at the rate that most people go. The price is irrelevant because you really don't have to buy anything ever again. I legitimately could sell half of what I have and never buy anything new again, and still not finish it all. And I think that's the boat that the majority of us are probably in when it comes right down to it. So this whole gripe about prices just drives me crazy. If you're on a fixed income, build what you got. You don't have to buy new stuff. I understand that idea. You want to buy new stuff. But these people act like every single kit that comes out is something you have to purchase. And that's really where you're a hoarder at that point. This is a hoard, more or less. Very organized one, but it's still way more than anybody could really need, and a lot of it is compulsion buying. But I don't, not be able to pay my bills, and I don't feel the need to buy every single thing that comes out. I see a lot of people like, oh, that kit's coming out, I gotta buy it. Oh, that kit's coming out, I gotta buy it. Oh, I can't afford all these new model kits at $25 a pop because I'm buying every single reissue and release that comes out. Why? You got 10 of them anyway when it comes to reissue stuff. And the amount of Revell kits that I purchased in the last 2 years is probably less than 10, because majority of what they've released, aside from either being things that don't interest me in general, it's just been most of what they do is reissues, and I have all of those kits from the first time around. I don't need a second one, but it's also very disheartening to see this. And I know it's probably a minority, but my God, do they talk really loud, that constantly complain about that factor. Look, if you can't afford the hobby, you can't afford the hobby. I'm sorry that that's the situation you're in, but chances are you have a hobby shop in your house anyways, and you really don't need to be able to afford the hobby in terms of new purchases. Also, what other hobby does anyone ever get involved in where they constantly complain about the prices of the things involved in their hobby? I mean, I challenge you, and because I'm going to say something here, and then I'm going to give the rationale behind why I realize that nobody ever does it, and why it also applies directly to the hobby. You never see anyone like who skis sit around and complain about, oh, can you imagine what the lift ticket cost this year? You know what? I remember when I was in my in my 20s and skis were $25 a pair. Now, God, I don't even know what skis cost, but I'm assuming they're halfway to $1,000 at least by now for a good pair of skis. Skis are so expensive, or I golf, and look, when you golf, and I know people who do golf and consider them, and some people consider it more than a hobby. They would like to be professional golfers, so they just suck at it. Those people are constantly replacing drivers, or constantly replacing their irons, or constantly buying new putters. But these people also have never ever said to me, you know what, Jim, I can't stand the fact of what it costs to rent a cart and the green fees these days. I just, I can't. I don't know. There's a new driver. Callaway has a new driver up, but they want $575 for this driver, and there's no way in the world. When I was a kid, I only spent $75 on a driver. I'm not spending $575 on it. It doesn't happen. And then I realized that the reason that it doesn't happen in those things is because those hobbies are, well, if not upper middle class, they're hobbies that have you go into knowing they cost a lot of money. But at the same time, they didn't cost that much money when the people got into it. They've just sort of accepted it. And seeing the posts that go on in that Facebook thread, and posts that just generally go on Facebook, or not Facebook, but forums and other places, Facebook included, about the constant kvetching about prices and using non-hobby related products in a hobby related method and all sorts of things. There is a large amount, and I'm assuming because some folks seem to think that plastic model building, and it's not that it is, it's just their view of it, is like a work-a-day lunch pale sort of blue collar hobby. It's not something that's supposed to cost a lot of money, but it's just something that everybody, you know, it's a hobby for coal miners and steel mill people. That's why we got 9 hobby shops in Pittsburgh, you know, or 7 hobby shops in Pittsburgh, and 2 of them may or may not be open on any given day because they're more part-time than full-time. But it's a class envy thing. I see people who take great pride in spending the least amount of money doing the things the hardest way possible just to prove they can squeeze a nickel out of a penny. Golf, tennis, skiing, fishing in a more than I have a reel in a pond sort of way, like you got a boat and a license and all that stuff, are just, you know, things that, you know, are viewed as, and we see this a lot of times with like releases of import kits and foreign stuff. You know, I wouldn't buy that because Ferraris are for you know, pricks and people I'm rich and blah. What does that have to do with your enjoyment of a model kit? And that's, I think that's what it is. There is this intense pride in being as cheap as bleepingly possible, and I just don't understand how that applies to a hobby. You know, in the grand scheme of things, this hobby is cheap. Still, I don't care how much the model kits cost. It's still not as expensive as fixing a real car. It's still not as expensive as having, you know, a season pass to an amusement park. I know I have people that go to like Disney World 6-7 times a year from up here. So you're paying, you know, thousands of dollars every time you go to Disney World. Traveling is their hobby. You know, it's golfing, fishing, anything that requires fishing. It's a boat. My dad used to say about boats. It's a hole in the water you throw money into. 2 happiest days with a boat are the day you buy it and the day you sell it. I don't understand. I just don't get it. It costs what it costs. And yes, the costs have gone up, but so has the cost of a gallon of gas and a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk and your house and a car and everything else. It's just, your childhood is over. Deal with it. I don't understand how to say it. It's just, you know, for these people at Revell, we're probably like, here's a very exciting thing. We changed our profile picture on Facebook. We changed our background picture on Facebook. We're making this exciting announcement that kits are on their way over. And we've restarted this Facebook page, and we're going to have a new Revell, you know, Revell.com US website any day now. Yay! And some people, for the most part, the majority of people did take it that way. But holy mother of God, has it got to be annoying to the person who's doing their social media to see that sort of thing just piled into the first hour of their, you know, exciting, happy news. Hey, great things are happening at Revell. Yeah, well, you're still gonna F us on the price. Oh, please, take your shitty attitude and get out. Just sell your kits, sell your paint, sell your airbrushes if you, well, of course you don't have an airbrush because you're a cheap shit. But take all that nastiness and just take that negativity someplace else. We don't need it in the hobby anymore. There, I've said it. I'm tired of these people's attitudes about this stuff. I get some people don't have money. I don't have epic amounts of money either. I get the fact that budgets exist. Things happen. But holy moly, I don't sit here every week telling you about how bad this week was at work. Oh, I can't afford this thing this week. Why? I don't need to know that crap about your life. If you can't afford it, shut up. You can't afford it. I'd be like constantly going into work every day and complaining about your next door neighbor's car because, yeah, I can't afford to buy a new car. I don't know. He just every 3 years he's leasing a new car. Asshole. Car prices these days anyway. Wow, there's a large amount of people out there that, and I've told a few people this recently in their own dealings with those type of people within the hobby or just in general. A lot of people out there that exist solely to be miserable, and they're only happy as it you know, exists in their world by making other people just as miserable as they are. Take your little misery suitcase and go find something else to do with your time. Stop infecting the thing that we love with your Thank you. It's been a public service message approved by the Stash Project. All right, so moving on to the stuff that actually came out this week. There were no new kit announcements, as we would expect in the beginning of September, especially with the hobby show coming up and all the stuff for the end of the year already being announced, but there were several kit releases. So we'll start on the domestic side of things, because as I mentioned, a number of the stuff from round 2 came out. How much interesting any of this is to anybody sort of depends on your subject matter, I guess. So we'll start over at NPC. They had 2 kits coming out. For the month of September, first up, we have the 1/18th scale Hydra V boat kit. I normally don't touch on the boat kits very much, but I've like I said when we put this into the monthly recap show, it hasn't been available for over 50 years, and this is one of those things that, when in terms of what round two does, I really enjoy, because even though I have absolutely zero intentions of buying this kit, I can point at my laptop. You guys are looking at the screen up here. But also, this is probably blocking my whole face, so pointing at it doesn't help anyway. But, this is the sort of thing that really goes into what they do extremely well, which is finding this old stuff laying around and reissuing it. How well is this going to sell? I think it really depends on whether or not you have a diecast collection or not, because it being 1/18 scale, it's not going to fit behind pretty much any model kit, really. It's too big for 1/20th scale. For your Lindbergh reissues of SUVs and things like that, which would be kind of a cool thing, just to have like a 90s SUV pulling this, because it's like a vintage boat. It's a period in time sort of thing. In my mind, I could see like, yeah, at this time I had this cool vintage boat, and because there really aren't any modern SUVs or pickup trucks other than the stuff that Meng put out, but it also, is too small for, 1/16th scale and all that sort of thing. So, if you have some die-cast things that it could fit behind, I could certainly see this being an interesting little piece. Like we said, not a whole heck of a lot to this kit in general, but it does, it is out there for you, and, it'll probably be the only boat kit we ever mention on here. The other NPC kit that came out this week was the Joker Getaway car, the 3-in-1, as it were, version of the 78 Dodge Monaco, and you can build it, of course, as the Joker Goon car, or the Gotham City Police car, or what they're calling a stock Monaco. I only use air quote with stock because, of course, anybody who's seen this kit since it came out in 1978 knows that it has ridiculously deep dish pizza wheels and horribly huge oversized tires as a result. Doesn't mean it builds a bad kit. It's actually a pretty enjoyable build. It's not the most fantastic thing in the world, but it's not the worst NPC kit that was ever out there. If you're interested in a late 70s sedan, it's a venerable tooling at this point, because I've built at least 2 or 3 of these things, and I know Scott and I had a discussion about what else this thing has been. It's also, of course, been the Dukes of Hazzard car, which is the most recent release of this, which was back in 2004, and it's the T.J. Hooker car at one point in time, and back when that TV show existed. If you're a certain age, you don't even know who T.J. Hooker is. It's okay. You missed out on when Heather Locklear was hot and not a crazed drug addict, but other than that, you didn't miss much. But, it's the kicker here, and the reason why this has been reissued this way is, of course, it has this resin Joker figure included with it. It has new decal sheet for, various graphics. The Gotham City stuff is pretty much a reproduction of the decals that were in the kit when it was released back in 1989, when the Batman movie came out, and this was tied in with it. Which, again, we talked about this before. I understand why, because they weren't going to tool up a new kit of like a Chevy Malibu, which was what a lot of the Gotham City Police cars and the Joker Goon cars were in that movie for some reason. But this was really just nowhere near close to what the actual movie was about, and I get why. Hey, we have this tooling layer on it. It's a 4-door older car. Nobody will really pay attention to that. Approved. But, it's wildly not right for what the movie is. Be like reissuing the old Batmobile from the 1960s show for the 1989 movie and being like, hey, it's a Batmobile. What do you want from us? But, it's still just, it's one of those classic kits that's, has stood the test of time, as it were. Wouldn't buy another one, I don't think. But it's not, like I said, it's not the worst thing out there. It's not the best representation. But there are replacement wheels and tires if you really want to build a 1978 Dodge Monaco. I mean, the light bar in this thing is supposed to be a Federal Signal era Dynic. It's a really bad representation of one, but there are obviously resin replacements for most emergency lighting out there. If the parts are still in there, it was one of the only cars that had a firearm as part of the police parts to the kit. And like I said, it's not a bad model. And if you really wanted to build a period correct 1970s, late 1970s police car, like a real 1-to-1, make a replica, it's the best base for that there is. Especially, like I said, if you fix the wheels and tires and make them a little more prototypically correct, rather than them being this these great big deep dish wheels that are on these old dirt track tires. But anyway, enough about that. I'm blathering on about a model kit that's almost as old as I am. So you have some stuff out of AMT, and there are 2 cars and 2 uh, heavy commercial things. First up, you have the 1/32nd scale 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. This great vintage packaging that replicates the All-Star packaging, as they call it Scale Stars now, probably because All-Stars is copyrighted by one of the sports leagues, I would imagine. Great piece for slot cars, obviously. 1/32nd slot cars. They do, like I said, it has chrome pieces in it. We talked about that before. Sorry, in fact, it says right there on the box art, but we talked about that before. That these are, a little bit better than your, random snap tight cars. But it's obviously a very, very simple kit. And, they've released, I believe, 3 of these so far. So this will be the 4th one out of a lineup of 8. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually get through them all. Then you have the Plymouth Prowler, which is a reissue of a Snap-Tight kit. I don't think it's does say Snap Together. I really didn't look. I pulled these images down off our local hobby shop's Facebook page, and I really didn't study them before I went on. Just like, ooh, look, pictures. Ah, cool. So this, we mentioned, is molded in 4 colors. I haven't been over there. I thought about going over today, but it's just already halfway through the day. And I'm assuming, again, it's going to be like black, light gray, dark gray, and purple, because like the bumpers and things like that on the Prowler are sort of a dark graphite color. The interior is a much lighter gray, and the chassis is obviously black, and then the kit itself will be purple, unless they've done the whole body and everything in purple, and then this chrome wheels are a color. But like I said, Snap-Tight kit. Curbside obviously being a Snap-Tight kit. I'm not sure where the interest in this lies, necessarily in the idea of why it had to be reissued per se. But it's, I don't know. It was an interesting car that wasn't quite there, and it sort of spawned that whole little era of things like the SSR and the PT Cruiser was a little bit of it, and what was it, the HT or whatever the sort of sedan delivery version of the SSR was. HHR was that? I think that was what it was. Of those sort of 1950s thing, hot. Well, this is more like a 1930s hot rod with the no front fenders look to it, but that very vintage. Hey, look, we're gonna remake a bunch of older looking cars. Everybody looks at an SSR and tells me that isn't the front end of a 1950 Chevy pickup. I don't know, you don't know what you're looking at exactly, but we saw those sort of weirdly retro-y cars come out, and other than maybe the PT Cruiser, none of them were really particularly successful either. Well, the SSR was really a singular function vehicle, much like the Prowler was. You ain't going to go buy your groceries in the Prowler. There's no trunk to it for all intents and purposes. Anyway, I'm in tangenty mood today, can you tell? Moving on to the truck stuff. You have this. This is the Great Dane Extendable Heavy-Duty Flatbed Trailer, with the wording that goes on forever there. This does have a fully functioning sliding tandem, which is sort of an interesting feature back in the 1970s, that you could design stuff like that, but in the current, world, that's too complicated. I say this only because it's, the slider system on like the Mobius trailers, that totally could have been made to work instead of just being fixed, but be that as it may. You do get the, I don't know what that is supposed to be exactly, a architectural steel piece, looks like a bridge truss. It is molded in white and black, so I'm not exactly sure what the divvy is on the parts necessarily. I'm assuming that it's probably going to be like chassis pieces specifically are black, and like the deck and things like that. And obviously, I'm assuming the structural steel are what are molded in white. But it's fun to have that back. It's been a little while since it's come out, and of course, it's in the original sort of Ertl packaging there. And then the other AMT release for this month that has come out so far is this. This is the Peerless Logging Trailer. You have your choice of your steel beam, which is not architectural steel. That's more of like a warehouse support kind of thing, and some logs. They're big, they're heavy, they're wood. Just another 1970s trailer. It's one of those things where you kind of have built one by now, right? Fun to have back, cool to have back, but you've seen the inside of one by now. I'm pretty sure that you can build it unextended. I'm almost positive that I've seen people, and maybe this is just a scratch building thing they've done where they've run it, on its non-extended format. In one of these trailers, you can suck up that middle so that it's not just running down the road as a great big, really, really shaky piece of equipment. Because, lengthened out, the reason why it's stable is all of that weight is sort of balancing out the length of the vehicle. If you want to, run that down the road empty, the back end would just bounce constantly, and you have, just that little beam running down the middle to keep it all in one piece. So in real life, you would suck that part up. You can see if you go back and look at the thing, because the box art isn't up anymore. If you go back and look, you can see there's a hole in the back of the chassis where the mud flaps are, and that's where that beam comes through. And usually you can set it up so that it sort of rides on the back of the trailer. At any rate, I guess I've seen people build them that way. I just don't know if you can actually build the kit that way, or if that's just something that they decided to do. But be that as it may, that's back out. So we go overseas to look at our releases over there. A few reissues from Aocean we'll talk about real quick. First up is the only kit that has been reissued so far, and this is actually something supposed to come out from last month, and that is the Nissan Fairlady Z Aero Custom. My wife is asking if I'm going to order some pizza. Dang straight. We talked about this before. This is a relatively old kit in terms of the guts of it. Motorized chassis and things like that, with a newer tool body on it. It includes a lot of parts to build this stock, but you can't build it stock because all of the fender flares and things like that are integrated into the newly tooled body. It's still a kind of neat car. Hobby Design is doing their own sort of version of it. It's a more modern take than this was back when it was tooled up about 10, 15, well, I think the body was tooled up 10 years ago. The kit itself is from the 1980s. And so that'd be really interesting to see how that all works out in the end in terms of sales for Hobby Design. I know this kit is ridiculously popular, especially in Japan, because it constantly gets reissued if you watch the show. But that's back out. And then we had all of the September wheel sets have been reissued, and they are the Kaku Tekken Type 1 steel wheels, the Formula Mesh 4 lugs there, the SSR Formula Meshes. Then we have the 19-inch wheels, which are the Volk Racing CE28Ns, the Volk Racing TE37s, and then into 20-inch wheels, ooh la la, you get the Workschwart SC4s and the 20-inch BBS LMs. Now, the BBS LMs are available in 18-inch, or, well, they were made in 18-inch. I don't know how available they would be necessarily unless you order them, or unless you take them, I should say, out of one of the GTR kits that has them in it. I'm not sure why they haven't really resold that 18-inch wheel in a wheel set necessarily that much, but the 20 inches get reissued constantly. Obviously, the 20 inches is more designed for a VIP, but you could take a 20-inch wheel and put it under a sports car that uses that kind of size wheel. Obviously, a new GTR, any kind of Lamborghini or anything like that's already running 19, 20-inch wheels anyway. So then it gets into a whole not ethics, but a whole aesthetic thing where it's like, I don't know, really put Work Schwartz on a Lamborghini necessarily, but be that as it may, buyer beware, so to speak. Then we have one reissue out of Fujimi, and that is going to be their molded in black version of the Toyota Alphard GF 3.5L. This is the kit that was just released, of course, last month in a white pearl body. This is a modified reissue of the Toyota Velfire van. New front clip, new back clip. I believe there's also a new roof panel along with new wheels and a new steering wheel as well. This release, for some reason, gave out an actual parts listing of what was new, which is what we told you was new. Nothing surprised me about that, but it's a fairly comprehensive thing. It's about, I want to say 15, 17 new parts that are in this to convert it to the more stodgy upscale Alphard. Molded in black. It's a snap-tie kit. The whole shtick is no paint, no glue. There is a small sheet of real decals in here for the Alphard badging on like the grille, some of the interior things like the gauges and the nav system, as well as like the Toyota logos for the wheels and the scripting for the back of the deck lid and things like that. So it is, an option out there to not use the Mylar stickers that are included and do all the painting and foiling or Molotow chroming that you might require in order to, do a more, builder-friendly version for an adult builder rather than just being something for younger kids. And then we have 3 reissues from Hasegawa. First up is a reissue of the Porsche 962C Joust team. This is, of course, the fairly famous, I would say, block punked livery. This is for the 1989 World Sports Car Race Championship. I want to say Racing Series. It was the Japanese Sports Car Prototype Series. It is the World Sports Car Championship Series. This car, as it's configured on the box art with Pescalero in it, was not actually raced full time. Henry was not in this car the entire season. He was also in another car for part of the season. This particular car didn't really do that well. It had, I believe, 1 podium finish involved in its running, and for the most part, otherwise it was a back of the field type of thing. They do include the decals for the number 7 car, which was the more famous of this livery. Mine just slipped out of who the drivers were on that, and I looked it up. Crud. The interesting thing about this, at least where the instructions are scanned on Hobby Link or Hobby Search, is the fact that they do not seem to include instructions on how to do the decals for the number 7 car. I don't know that it's just as simple as swapping out the numbers and the driver names on the door, because there seems to be more decals involved in this than the actual decal layout, shows. So you can convert it to the other car. The number 7 car did win a race in France, and then podiumed several others. The 2 drivers finished, I believe, 5th and 6th overall in points that year, so you can make the more successful version of this car as well. And then you have a couple of the great things, just because I think these are so odd and it's interesting to see them come back. The 1/24th scale F1 cars. So you have a reissue of the Williams FW14B in 1/24 scale. I find the livery choices in this release amusing, to say the least, because if you look there, you will notice that there are Labatt's logos all over this car. And beer, we're okay with that. What is missing off this car is a number of Camel livery decals. Smoking, no, 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 no. Drinking, have at it, children. So it's a full detail kit within the current confines of their 1/24 scale thing. Like the motor was more or less all molded together in 2 halves, and you add heads and induction and stuff like that. But it's not quite, a 1/20 scale multi-piece Tamiya kit or anything else like that. But you will, of course, have to seek. I don't believe there are any available right now, but you will have to seek alternative livery options if you want to make the livery complete. Because as of right now, it's not. The irony with the no smoking is bad for you is this. The 1/24 scale cabin racing team Lola T9050 Formula 3000 car. Now, Formula 3000 cars were sort of a, step down, if you will, racing series that ran in Japan. Several Formula 3000 drivers went on to attempt F1, some more successful than others. But the obvious reason why this is amusing is, of course, Cabin is a tobacco sponsor. So this car can have tobacco sponsors all over it, but you couldn't have Camel livery on the other one. So the real story there might not be so much that they don't want to put cigarette sponsorship on their models. It might be the Camel, livery is expensive. Or maybe the fact that kit never had Camel livery when it was done, and they just reproduced the old decal sheet. But be that as it may, you get all the smokes on this one. You can build 2 different cars here out of this. There were 2 different cabin Lolas run in Formula 3000 that year. This car, as it sits, is the championship car for the season. And I want to say this is, 1990 Formula 3000 season. The interesting thing about this car and the way they've done the kit is that the winning car was Mugen power, so it's a Honda engine, and the other car ran a Ford engine. And so you build this thing up, and again, this is sort of full detail the same way. You put the engine together, and it comes to where you put the cylinder heads on, or the valve covers, really, and one set is a Honda set of valve covers, and the other set's a Ford set of valve covers. Well, they look pretty much the same anyway, and obviously the engine architecture wouldn't have been that dramatically different, when you're talking about a fixed displacement engine like you run in a open wheel race car. But it's just very funny to see that's how they solved that problem. There are no Ford logos on this car as it ran. It only has the Mugen logos on the Honda powered one, so they didn't need to license it through Ford per se, because like I said, there are no Ford logos on here. But it's just very interesting to see the way they went about that. That they were obviously not going to tool up a whole completely separate, different Ford block and engine, so they just give you some valve covers that are different. And if that was legitimately close enough, why not, really? So again, that's out there. It's a very, very, very interesting conversation pieces, because of course an F1 car is not that big to begin with in 1/20 scale and 1/24 scale. They're really ridiculously tiny, especially the older ones. And you get to see exactly how small F1 cars are in reality when you put them next to even the most mid-sized Japanese sedan or something like that, or GTR or something, or anything that's in 1/24 scale. So anyway, guys, that wraps up this weekend, and this week's video. I hope you had a good weekend. We're biblically rained on here in Pennsylvania. I know that most of everything, say north of I-70, was biblically rained on this weekend as the tropical storm Gordon stuff rolled through. So that was fun, but we've come out the other side, and we'll dry out here eventually. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed it. See you guys on the other side.